H for cutting my sister-in-law out of my life, even if it disrupts family dynamics. Myself 25, and my husband Tom 27. His brother Fern, 30, his sister Margaret, 40, and her husband Corey, 37, their dad and their stepmom. This is going to be super long, so I apologize in advance. But there really is so much to get through. I married into the family about a year ago. They are all a pretty tight-knit bunch, but have been exceedingly welcoming and accepting towards me. It took a while for me to warm up, because I'm always hesitant around new people. But I actually have a lot of fun with them, and they have gone out of their way to make me feel like part of the family. I discovered early on that my husband's family has a unique way of handling conflict, and it's in sharp contrast to the way my own family handles disagreements. My family confronts issues head-on, sometimes ending in screaming matches if it gets heated enough. And all of us tend to speak up when something is bothering us or is fundamentally hurtful to someone. Tom's family is the opposite. They rarely address anything in real time, if at all. They typically whisper about it behind each other's backs, and usually just sit in tension for extended periods of time. It's been made clear to me that the only person in his family that is directly allowed to address an issue is their dad. Everyone else follows suit. This means if he isn't saying anything, no one else does, period. The issue in all of this: my husband's sister Margaret. I'll give you a little bit of background. She has 4 kids with her husband Corey, and they have a really odd dynamic between the two of them. Margaret is the more domineering of the two, often speaking for the both of them while Corey just sort of sits there and nods along. Margaret is really prone to emotional outbursts over things that simply do not make any sense. There are so many instances of the chaos that Margaret has caused within the family that it would take an eternity to describe them all. I do have some notable ones though. Repeatedly guilting people if they don't immediately drop everything to watch her 4 kids. Screaming at the top of her lungs, causing a huge scene when there was tomatoes on her salad during a birthday party. Regular complaining that no one helps her with anything. Her apartment, car and kids have been almost exclusively funded by the rest of the family without any expectation of being paid back. And trash-talking her entire family publicly on social media on a regular basis. Not once has anyone ever addressed these things with her, and it's continued to escalate over time. The biggest issue right now is the rift between Margaret and the stepmom, and how that is affecting the entire family, myself included. Stepmom married into the family about 4 years ago, and is one of the kindest people I have ever met, point blank, period. Margaret publicly shames her at every family function, and seems to specifically reach for the cruelest things you could say do to someone. Margaret regularly asks stepmom to babysit, but freaks out when stepmom says no to any of her children. Margaret insists that this is toxic and abusive parenting. Stepmom can't have children, and Margaret has told her that she's thankful for this, because it was God doing the world a favor. She's told stepmom that she was the reason her cousin killed herself. She refuses to acknowledge her as a matriarchal figure, and regularly says things like, "This is my dad's house. Not yours, I'm not your daughter. You'd never be fit to be a mom. And IDK, why my dad even married you." Margaret has gone as far as to compare stepmom to their dad's ex-wife, who stabbed him and ended up in prison. Stepmom has reached out multiple times to try and make peace with the situation. But Margaret escalates every time she does. All of this is so absurd for a woman of her age that I can't stand it. I have kept my mouth shut for years at this point out of respect for the family norms even through all of this. But last week I decided I'd had enough. Fern called me in tears to tell me that Margaret had ruined a dinner they went to that night. Again. Margaret has regularly used Fern as an emotional punching bag, and him calling me in tears is a regular occurrence at this point. At dinner, Margaret had called him fat, and told him she didn't want her kids around him anymore, because they would think being fat is okay. For context, Fern has struggled with an eating disorder for most of his life. On the phone call, Fern basically spilled his guts. There's a family vacation to Italy every few years, and apparently stepmom isn't going anymore, because of Margaret. Fern also let me know that there has been talk of cutting Margaret out of the family for years. But their dad hasn't even started the conversation of this isn't okay yet. So none of them can say anything. Fern had tried to contact the husband Corey, to see if there was something going on, but Corey refused to talk. I have always been friendly with Corey, he's a nice guy. And if you can get to him without Margaret in the room, he's actually really full of life and fun, so I called him myself. Corey told me that everyone is being so mean to Margaret, and she's trying to break generational cycles. It sounded like he had a script in front of him the whole time, and was almost word for word the same nonsense that Margaret says all the time. Margaret is a victim, Everyone else is crazy, no one understands her, etc. etc. After listening to him for a while, I told him I cared about him, but that I was done with Margaret's BS. I blocked their numbers, their social media, and eliminated any other ways they had to contact me. This is a big no-no in this family. You don't confront it. You don't say anything. You just sit there and take it. I contacted Fern and stepmom and told them about my decision, and let them know that I wasn't going to show up to anything if Margaret was also going to be there. I told Tom and we had a whole conversation about it. Everyone is telling me they support me in my decision, but they have all also said some variation of I wish I could do that, because I am in the same boat. The subsequent backlash from all of this is that although I am maintaining relationships with the rest of the family, Margaret is even worse at functions now. I don't have to see it, but I hear about it all the time and I'm starting to wonder if I made the wrong decision. I didn't want to make it worse for anyone, but I just couldn't watch it happen anymore without escalating things myself. It really was getting to a point where I felt so stifled that I thought I might hit her out of frustration, which is why I chose to back out after all of this. The family still hasn't said anything to her, and my husband told me that they all have a role to play, but that I also kind of disrespected his dad by doing this. Am I the jerk? Told her. My Sil plays the victim a lot, but is actually the aggressor most of the time, and I chose to end all contact, which is upsetting the rest of the family. OP answered questions in the comments. Did you know how screwed up this family was before you married into it? I did know about it, and had serious reservations for a while. The ultimate deciding factor is that, outside of Margaret, all of them are truly incredible people that would give you the shirt off their backs without you even having to ask. They have a lot of strengths as individuals and even more as a unit, but for whatever reason Margaret does not seem to see this the same way I do. I married into the family being relatively certain that I could deal with a family of doormats over a family of Margarets. There's always one. Ya know. Has your husband and his family spent time with your family? My husband has spent considerable time with my family, but they live overseas, Australia, so it hasn't been financially feasible for most of his side of the family to come hang out for extended periods of time. Our dads have met on multiple occasions, but nothing long-term outside of the wedding. What will happen when you and Tom have kids? We do not have kids and neither does Fern. Only Margaret does. She threatens to keep them from the family all the time. I shut that shit down for myself months ago. I told her you don't bring them around me anyway. She didn't speak to me for almost 3 months. Because it straight up just didn't work on me. The family has put up with this for too long. To my knowledge, it started happening around the time stepmom arrived in the picture. Margaret already had 2 kids at that time, but the other 2 are still young. 4 and 7. I wasn't there though, so I can only go based off of word of mouth. Comments. Comment 1. We had a Margaret in my family. It's been 15 years since I went NC with my sister. Over the years everyone else has realized how she is the entitled and insane she is, and they've cut her out of her lives as well. The beauty of it all is that she is the living embodiment of the meme from The Simpsons. Am I the problem? No, it's my parents' brother's ex-husband, all 4 of my children, aunts, uncles and cousins who are wrong. Comment 2. 2. Patriarchs want the respect and responsibility of being head of the family. But being head of the family means having the responsibility and demanding respect for everyone in the family. Phil is disrespecting the many to not deal with one. If I was anyone in that family, I would feel like I do not matter to Phil at all. He has chosen Margaret over everyone else. I'd cut ties with him for enabling her behavior. He knows his family is suffering, and he does nothing. Unacceptable. You say something and now he feels disrespected. Absolutely not. Update 1. 1. Wow, this blew up. I did not expect that. Before I give the most recent update, there are a ton of questions you guys had. I tried to answer you all individually, but here is more context. Tom is the only one in the dynamic that has low contact with Margaret. This happened very shortly after I entered the picture when I put my foot down over an incident that was absolutely ridiculous. Margaret had accused him of trying to kill her youngest after we lent her a carpet cleaner that smelled. I burn sage regularly. She was dead serious about it, and did not let up and was like, wow, good to know you have no regard for human life. He broke down in tears for almost a week before I had to sit him down and tell him, this is the most insane take ever. How the fuck is Sage going to kill a kid? You realize how nuts that is, right? Don't let her steamroll you like this. He went LC pretty immediately after that. Fern is a really soft-hearted person. It's been confirmed to me that growing up, Fern got it the worst from their biomom. It's made him extra susceptible to Margaret's manipulations and guilt trips. They were really close when they were kids, and Fern sometimes feels that without Margaret, his life will be empty. It causes him a lot of distress in both directions. Losing Margaret is a devastating thought to him. Staying around her causes him a lot of pain and generally puts him in a really dark place. He's struggling with it. We still talk regularly, and have a very close friendship. Corey's a really soft-spoken guy. Super funny, friendly, and nice generally speaking. He only shifts gears when Margaret is present. The rest of the family has identified this as fear. I only cut him off because of the way Margaret uses him to gather information and spread drama. He deserves better. But I think we can all understand how scary it must be for him to even think about standing up to himself. Considering that Margaret regularly threatens to take the kids away from someone, over something as small as not pouring her a glass of water once, roughly twice a month. Margaret has yet to actually follow through with this, and genuinely only uses it as a form of control, because of how effective it has been. It's like her Hail Mary pass. Mill really is a wonderful lady. She's really patient and understands how important Phil's kids are to him. She is trying her damnedest to not break up a family, and I think she genuinely wishes she could also stay out of it. Margaret has fully aimed everything at her at the moment, and it's put Mill in and it's put Mel in. She's a pretty tough lady. I think she's just as bewildered as the rest of us, and doesn't know what the fuck to do with the situation, because of how absolutely extreme it is. The Phil is getting a lot of hate in the comments. While I am not necessarily disagreeing with the statement that he lacks a spine and is allowing it to happen, I also see the pain that this is causing him. While emotions aren't the easiest thing for him, I have to consider how absolutely triggering the whole thing is. I mean, the last time he was around this kind of person, she attempted to kill him. I know him to be an incredibly brave man, even if he doesn't always outwardly express his feelings or his opinions. It's got to be hard to juggle and wrap his head around this. He loves his wife, he loves his daughter. I agree that he should put an end to it, and that it's been a long time coming, but I absolutely understand why it would be a huge hurdle for him to confront, both in real time and within himself. I tell him all the time that he's a good dad. Because he is. He really is. I think in the face of a super domineering woman, after all he and the kids have been through, just really puts him in an emotional pickle. I can absolutely understand that. Bio mom is a huge piece of shit. The family really doesn't talk about it much with what they have told me. I don't blame them. Bio mom frequently told the kids that she hated them and wished they were never born. She used them as ammo to get her way with other relatives. She regularly made life a competition between herself and the 3 daughters. There are 2 more that are not in the picture that I have never met, and at times was violent with them. Fern and Bio mom got into arguments on a regular basis. Fern attempted suicide several times really early in life, because of how abusive the environment was. This was also the birth of his eating disorder issues, because Bio mom regularly called him an ugly, useless waste of space. Thomas told me that he tried his best to stay out of the way, but that even he wasn't safe from the chaos. Oh yeah, and she regularly attacked Phil and eventually went to prison for attempted murder. Tom cut contact pretty immediately after that, followed by Margaret and Phil. Fern was the only one who tried to still have a relationship. The entire family has been absolutely NC with the biological mother and the other 2 daughters for over a decade. Now, to the update. I spoke to Tom again last night about this whole thing. I mentioned that I posted on Reddit about this, but I told him I wasn't going to show him until things cooled down with the family. He was cool with that. I asked him a few clarifying questions, because I'm still super confused about how any of this got to the point that it has. He told me that no one is necessarily waiting on Dad to say something, but that everyone knows that he is the head of the family. So the NC thing wouldn't work unless Phil decided to do it as well. Pretty much either they all have to do it, or none of them can without seriously compromising the relationships that do remain. Margaret lords the kids over everyone. Apparently this is the biggest barrier for the family. Tom says he is virtually indifferent at this point, because he only sees the kids at family functions. But for Fern, Phil, and Mill it's a lot different. Margaret is the only one of the siblings that has children, and she has regularly turned to the 3 of them for babysitting and financial support. They are all super attached to the kids, and are really struggling with finding the lesser of 2 evils. I told him that I could understand that, but that I was still confused as to why everyone was okay with the automatic response to any barrier or boundary is you won't see the kids again. It's not simple for anyone except me, I guess. I'll admit, I'm very fuck them kids in any situation like this. Children are not currency emo, so whenever anyone has pulled this on me, I have not hesitated to be like, okay, bye? Tom let me know that he still has plans to talk to his father about this, but that he ultimately feels that he cannot control any of it, so he is doing his best to compromise. He doesn't like Margaret at all. He pretty much wants nothing to do with her or her kids at this point. He also doesn't want to abandon his family over this because he feels like Margaret wins in that situation. He is playing the fence, to be fair. But I can't expect more than that from him. I get it. I also talked to Mel yesterday. She's pretty confused because she comes from a family that confronts things heads on too. She has tried to talk to Margaret to squash things, but it goes more and more south when she does. I think this puts her between a rock and a hard place. She personally thinks that the only thing she did to offend Margaret is marry Phil. I gotta be honest, I agree. Because Mill is so generous with her money, love, support, and attention that I find it very hard to believe that even a fraction of what Margaret is feeling is valid. Mill is a cool lady, and I have come to regard her as a very good person. Her current stance is no one is going to get through to her. I am not going to give my husband ultimatums, that's his daughter. It's his choice what he wants to do. For now I am distancing myself, which is why I am choosing to not go to Italy with him. Myself, Fern and Tom are going over to Mel Phil's house this Sunday. They were out of town on Mother's Day, so we rescheduled. Originally Margaret and Corey were part of a group gift that I had fully planned and mapped out to give to Mom. However, very early in the process they started pulling some lightly shady shit, and I realized that this gift was going to be used to further manipulate the process. This was the straw that broke the camel's back for me. They have been completely cut out of the plan, and are not welcome on Sunday. I feel bad that this means Corey also gets excluded. We all adore him, and the only thing he has done wrong is not challenge his wife on. But due to their proximity and the way Margaret uses him, he also had to be cut out of it. They have not contributed to the gifts because I purposely barred them from doing so. One of them is a very large college with images of all the children. Margaret and Corey are nowhere on this college, on purpose. I also doubled down as hard as I could, incorporating several other gifts with the kids' names, likenesses, etc., without including Margaret at all. You don't get to treat someone like absolute shit, and then use my thoughtful idea to twist shit, and use it against someone in the future. Sorry. If you wanted to be on it so badly, you should grow the fuck up. Maybe it's overkill, maybe it's mean. All I know is I've had enough and I am in full support of Emil. Also in full support of fuck around and find out, play stupid games, win stupid prizes, talk shit, get hit, and don't bite the hand that feeds you. Emil also let me know that she sent Margaret a letter in the mail. This is how bad the situation has gotten. Emil continues to try to rectify the situation, but Margaret blocks her at every turn in favor of being mean over shit that really doesn't matter in the bigger scheme of things. I'm pretty sure this double whammy of the gifts and letter will stir up an obscene amount of shit in the very near future. All that anyone would really need is an apology that takes full accountability without pointing fingers, making excuses, or playing the victim. That in itself would be a huge step for Margaret, and a sign that she is open to growth. It hasn't happened yet, I doubt it ever will. I'll give more updates as it all unfolds. I anticipate this being a long process. Comments and answers. Margaret is too reliant on her family to follow through with taking the kids away. I genuinely have brought this up a lot to them. It wouldn't make sense for her to cut off her primary babysitters, financiers, and punching bags. She would lose her apartment and her SOM role, and have to work like the rest of us. They would revoke the car, and she would have no way to get around. She would be even less financially stable on top of that, because she now needs to find childcare, and a way to transport her older kids to from school. I have stressed these points until I was blue in the face. She is not going to cut anyone off. It is in Margaret's best interest to keep towing everyone along. She does nothing but benefit from the chaos she manufactures and causes. This has fallen on deaf ears. Or when it is received, it's not received well. I understand that it might be a cold thing to say to them, but it's the honest truth and reality of the situation. Daniel is a river in Egypt. Will the family consider therapy? I'm in therapy, as is Tom. Fern is on and off. And supposedly Margaret is in therapy for herself, a couples therapist for her and Corey. And has a life coach. Not sure what to do with that info. Someone should tell Margaret she's acting like her mother. This is the ultimate kicker. Fern, Tom, and Phil all talk about how Margaret is essentially their bio mom all over again, and how she triggers the shit out of everyone when she's around. I have my own checkered background in this regard, and have to admit that even I get triggered by her antics sometimes. Corey knows that this is a topic of conversation, and that it happens often. On our last phone call, I brought it up again. Corey's response was Margaret gets triggered by everyone saying she's triggering them. That sounds like a wildly convenient way to avoid all accountability. I translated it as I'm doing really mean things and making my family feel isolated, scared and hurt, but I'm still the victim because I can't believe they feel that way, so it's actually their fault. I've brought this up to the family since they all fucking talk about it all the time. Nothing. Nada. Zilch, it's been years of talk of we should really do something. Never mind, let's stay out of it. This is really out of control. She's gonna do what she wants, so why bother, etc. The roller coaster has given me the strangest form of whiplash, I swear. What's the story on the other sisters? The remaining family cut them off. I don't have all the details, but I know it was first one. Then a few years later the other. All I know is that they were too much like their mom for anyone to handle. The shoe fucking fits. There's been some alluding to drug use and theft, but I haven't heard the whole story or had concrete information told to me. They really don't like to talk about it. Update 2. So as y'all know, myself, Fern and Tom had planned some Mother's Day gifts for Milo. I gotta admit I was worried that Margaret would show up and ruin the whole thing. But it was actually a surprisingly good day, mostly because she wasn't there, which was the obvious elephant in the room the whole time. Tom worked the grill for a while, and we had Mill open the gifts I had planned. It was a small pirate chest filled with letters from myself, Fern, and Tom telling her how wonderful of a mother she was. I had aged them, and weathered them to look waterlogged and like they'd been around for a long time. I made her a boondoggle that said number 1 mom that had our names dangling from it. She opened the college. The whole thing left her in happy tears, which was nice but also sad at the same time. She said, "OP. You're such a shit for making me cry," then gave me a big hug. Elle started to talk about it all. It's been really rough and I've been having a really hard time. But it was cut off by the men fussing over the grill. I made the rest of lunch and we had a really good time for the most part. I clocked Phil's behavior in Margaret's absence. He wandered off into the yard and stood by himself for extended periods of time, staring at the ground in silence. I registered it as pain, I'm not gonna lie. It was palpable how much easier and fun, and quiet the afternoon was with Margaret being intentionally excluded. I could tell that Mel really needed to talk about what was going on, especially since she was being absolutely flooded with love, in stark contrast to what she's been receiving from Margaret. I approached her towards the end of the evening. She revealed to me what she had put in the letter. Essentially it reads something like this. Dear Margaret, I am sorry that we are having such a hard time seeing eye to eye. I have had my conflicts with Fern and Tom in the past that we have been able to resolve. Since you do not wish to speak to me directly, I am hoping that we can communicate this way to see each other more clearly. I think you're upset with me because I married your dad, but I am not sure because you will not tell me what is wrong. I want to make peace with you, but I cannot do that with you so blatantly disrespecting me. I feel like I deserve an apology. I feel used by you, especially since I signed your lease for you when you asked right before this happened. Please write me back so we can resolve this. I love you. Apparently Mel had Phil read it before she sent it. This looks like a last-ditch effort to rectify the tension, but I'm not sure what the outcome will be, because we all know that Margaret is going to freak the fuck out the second she reads it. Margaret can't handle any blame and has no sense of accountability. We can all see it coming, so definitely expect an update on that. On the ride home I absolutely fell apart. It made me so sad that she has had to go to these lengths to remedy a situation that she didn't cause in the first place. I was also very angry at Phil and basically the whole family for letting this go on for as long as it has. I ended up confronting Tom about this again. I told him that there are 600 strangers on Reddit calling him and his whole family spineless, and that I have found myself defending them because I know otherwise, but that in this situation those 600 strangers are absolutely right. I said that I know his dad is human, but that they are all a bunch of cowards for the fend for yourself, just let it go attitude they have when it comes to each of them being so wildly abused and disrespected as a family. Fern deserves better than to have a sister that has told them either the reason Fern got say as a kid is because he put himself out there like that. Excuse me. Corey deserves better than a wife who threatens to call the cops on him for not making her dinner. Tom deserves a better sister than one who has called me to tell me he's a creep and I bet he's done things to little girls before. No idea where that one came from. Bill deserves better than someone who asks her for money and favors only to turn around and rip her to shreds. The entitlement. And Phil deserves better than to have such little self-esteem that he'd rather watch his family disintegrate rather than cut out the cancer. Yeah. I was heated. Margaret makes shit up, takes things out of context, and regularly demonstrates that she genuinely feels the world is out to get her, and that everyone else is the problem. I did not let up. Tom listened very patiently. We exchanged a lot of words and the conversation took over an hour, the end result being my dad is nearing approachable about this subject. Today showed him the kind of life we can have without her. You definitely launched a psychological bomb at him with how well you planned the day and how much you showed Mill that she's worth something. He's struggling, but I promise that I'll talk to him about it soon. We talk 3 times a week, he knows it's coming. The last statement I made was I am not an on-the-fence person. I'm the only one who was outright picked a side, and it's not Margaret's because I refuse to enable this insanity anymore. It's wrong. And you guys are wrong for coddling a grown woman's hurt ego, knowing that it's harming literally everyone else in the family. Pick a side, and be done with it. I refuse to let Nell go this alone. We will see how much longer the circus goes on. I anticipate the events that happen this weekend, leading to the biggest blow-up that Margaret has had yet. The shady online posts have already started, per Tom, who has found it amusing and low of her. It's about to get a lot crazier when this letter hits. And even worse when she eventually visits Phil and sees a giant college with all the kids except for her.